Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Bettor Edge. Visit bettoredge.com. Download the app in the iOS App Store. Use code SPOTTRACK. Get yourself $20 off. It's the best social media betting place on the internet. Create the ads, create the VIGs, create the competitions. Use code SPOTTRACK and grab $20 today. That's bettoredge.com. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Tuesday, September 16th, one day late on this pod, letting some things percolate from week 2 of the NFL season. Getting some extra data work in as well as we are crunching both NFL and Major League Baseball numbers here, prepping for a big baseball offseason, which we're going to get to at the back end of this show. As usual, this time of year, let's start with some football. I'm going to jump right into our little contract breakdown, the visual contract breakdown that I've been promising with one of our shows each week. And you might not be surprised to find out that this week it's Joe Burrow. Taking a look here, you'll see this is a 7-year total value contract. It was a 5-year extension with 2 years remaining on his rookie contract. That gets us to 7 years and just over $310 million total value here on the contract. We're in year 3. It's been a kind of a nightmare, as you might imagine. Missed the playoffs last year, and this toe injury pretty much sets the Bengals up for another disastrous 2025 campaign, unless one of these backup quarterbacks, which we'll get to shortly, can resuscitate and keep this thing alive. Contractually speaking, as you can see with this line of demarcation or potential outline, there's 3 full years left in this thing in terms of substance. The Bengals are going to try to make that 4, as they do with most of their contracts, maybe even 5. But in terms of the guarantees and the vesting structure, obviously this year's fully guaranteed. And if we flip the cash here, you can see it's a little over $35 million this year. That same amount of price next season is already fully guaranteed, thanks to an early vesting trigger on that here. And then 2027, about half of that locks in next March, 5th league day of 2026. All of that, by the way, fully guaranteed at signing in terms of injury guarantees, which is somewhat important as we sit here today. And then all of 2027 officially becomes fully guaranteed by the 5th league day of 2027. So certainly through next year, completely locked in 100% as of today. Injury guaranteed through half of 2027 today. And all of it will be there by March of 2027, which leads us to this potential outline, because everything after that, 2 years and $91 million, comes with no early vesting guarantees. Now, there's some option bonuses and things like that can get maneuvered. Obviously, you can recommend that the Bengals will do some cap work here, despite the fact that they used 6 bonuses on this, a signing bonus and 5 option bonuses for proration purposes. But for now, it's a pretty hard and rocked place, 3-year contract over the course through 2027. And then we'll see where we are in 2028, because a lot can be said about that. What happens after 3 seasons? Jamar Chase's guarantees essentially begin to dwindle. T. Higgins are gone. T. Higgins is basically on a 2.5-year guarantee. Hendrickson's probably out the door next March. You're going to have a crop of new players. Yes, there'll be some players extended. Sure, they'll make some free agent signings because Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. But for all intents, this line right here could be a very important line in the Cincinnati Bengals franchise future, not just for Joe Burrow, but also where is this team? What does this team look like? How many times has the playoffs been a thing? Because obviously not last year. It's looking bleak now for 2025, and we'll see where we go from there. But things are lining up here quite nicely for Joe Burrow at 31 years old, 31 and change, heading towards his 32-year season, to maybe start to make some noise at that point in time, both with his contract, maybe with his standing in terms of the Cincinnati franchise going forward. So I'm not trying to sit here and, ring the fire alarm, but we're halfway through this contract, more than halfway through this contract now. This year's all but lost. The guarantees certainly hold him in place, but if this is another season without the postseason, and we'll see what they can do next March from a free agent standpoint, you could be looking at a situation where there's maybe 18 to 24 months of Joe Burrow football in Cincinnati before the public outcry starts to really happen. So, Obviously, it's a 7-year contract. The Bengals can put their foot down, and man, have they done that in the past. But we shall see. There is a full no trade clause, so Burrow does have some control in that regard. And, plenty of cash still left to go here. But that's the nuts and bolts of how this works. It was a 6 bonus structure. One of the most aggressive contracts the Bengals have ever given out. One of the most aggressive contracts in the history of football from a proration standpoint, from a dead cap standpoint, which is why you see numbers like this, 138 and change on a current dead cap for Joe Burrow. And this 56 will increase mightily on the 5th league day when more future guaranteed salary locks in. So, they had confidence. This was a confident extension when it happened for obvious reasons. But injuries, a lack of roster construction, have to be putting, more than just fans with a little bit of doubt going forward here. And as you can see, now halfway through this guarantee portion of the contract, it is time to start looking at this with some real eyes and understand that, man, a healthy Joe Burrow in 2026 really needs to come together. Okay. The roster needs to be aggressively rebuilt in certain areas, obviously at the offensive line. But the weapons are locked in now throughout this 3-year guaranteed window for Burrow. And the weapons of note for sure. So it's time for the Cincinnati Bengals to do something about this. Maybe not so much now this year, but March of 2026, easily one of the biggest teams to watch going forward. All right, Dan Soemann is here. We're going to talk some football for a little bit and then flip over to some of the Major League Baseball offseason notes that he's been starting to collect as we are 13 days to go in the regular season. It's here. It's officially time to start flipping that switch, and many teams have already done that. But first off, Dan, we're through week 2 of the NFL season. The overreactions are flying left and right. We're not so much going to feed into that, but I do want to throw some things at you because obviously, and by the way, this seems like the biggest broken record we have in the NFL. It does seem like we're at a point now where, 16, 17% of the league's starting quarterbacks are at least out for week 3, maybe even more long-term. Some of them, like Burrow, who I just referenced, could be lost for the entire season. I want to throw this at you because you and I have had this discussion offline for quite a bit. Some teams seem like they've come around to that, the Giants being one of them, which is hysterical. But as we look across the league right now, is there a situation where you feel there's a team right now, and maybe it's one of these teams who is already dealing with injuries, that has properly addressed the backup quarter situation to the point of you feel like they can actually carry themselves through an 18-week schedule right now and into a postseason with some validity, despite the fact that their QB1's been beaten up a little bit? Or is that just still one of those things in your mind, Dan, where it's those guys are so premium, so top dollar, that the second you actually lose them for multiple weeks and certainly for long term, your season is effectively over?
There's not many situations where you're going to a team suffers a season-ending injury to their starting quarterback and going to be able to endure it. There's plenty of situations that I think there's probably competent enough quarterbacks to withstand, to buoy a team for a month or 6 weeks at most. But like specifically the Joe Burrow stuff.
Yeah.
If it's 3 months or more, that's the end of the year playoffs. If the Bengals are good enough to be in the playoffs, I think whoever got them there, that's going to be a storyline in and of itself, to the point where Joe Burrow might not get rushed back, right? So a lot needs to go right there in that specific situation. In terms of teams, the Giants, we all laughed at it, right? But they are kind of in the best situation now here. Like a competent Russ Wilson, high-ish upside Jackson Dart, and now James, maybe the apple of these teams' eyes that need a quarterback with Jameis Winston. I think they got crushed early on for it. It might have still been the wrong decision, but the cards are gonna fall their way, in my opinion, on this one. So seems like they're best set up for it. I have confidence in a lot of these other coaching staffs that we might see them get more out of less with their backups, as in is Kevin O'Connell going to squeeze more out of that situation over the next month? We see Sean McVay. If Matt Stafford were to lose time, I have confidence that he's a play caller that will scheme his talented offensive pieces in the right direction. So if we're talking 2-3 weeks, a month, it's a different conversation than 3-4 months or end of the season, right? So
okay, I like where you went with some of this. The Bengals are going to Bengal, so I don't know if you've seen yet, but they are going to roll with Jake Browning, Mike White, and Sean Clifford, at least in the interim going forward here, which, if I do the quick math, is not Kirk Cousins or Jameis Winston. Is that correct?
Right now, yep.
Look, they were a fringe playoff team before this happened. And I think they're just the kind of addressing out loud that if they're gonna squeeze themselves into anything in 2025, they're gonna do it with value, because it's just probably the best way forward from a business standpoint. And we'll see where we get to at that point in time. I just broke down the Burrow contract before I had you in here, and it kind of feels like he's just the franchise guy forever. And then you look at the contract and you realize he's got about 2.5 years of guarantees left before this thing really starts to get fun. He'll be 31 at that point in time. The Chase contract will be out of guarantees. The Higgins contract will already be out of guarantees a year prior to that. Who knows defensively where things will be contractually, because Henderson's probably going to walk in March. So it's not time to say the sky is falling in Cincinnati, but they're certainly not rushing to get to a Super Bowl right now. Let's put it that way. That in any regard, right? They're not screaming out loud that they love who they are, right? They're not any of these teams like Detroit or Green Bay, or any of these fringe teams that have really taken the next step over the past couple of off seasons to put themselves in legitimate places. That's not Cincinnati. We're giving them high marks for keeping their own players at good prices. That's basic. Okay, that's basic. So the timeline on Burrow and by the way, not a player who's afraid to be outspoken, but the timeline for him becoming that outspoken or get off the pot guy in Cincinnati is probably pretty darn close now. And I realize this is him being injured, but you can probably start to foreshadow the 2026 Bengals as an all-in situation, a must-win situation. Because if it's 3 straight seasons, last year, potentially this year, and next year, if it's 3 straight seasons without a playoff and Joe Burrow's the quarterback, I think it starts to get real heavy around that team, and specifically with Burrow and his standing with the Cincinnati franchise. Let's get some positives out of this. I think Mac Jones to San Francisco was a sneaky good move. We know that Shanahan was trying to get him out of the draft originally before New England swiped him. So now he lands him in a fill-in role and has to use him for 3-4 weeks in San Francisco, in a team that's similar to Cincinnati, kind of trying to keep it together on fumes with all their injury history. I think Buffalo opting to keep Trubisky behind Josh Allen when they had an opportunity to go $3-4 million cheaper. Quite frankly, they could have gone down to a minimum, a UDFA rookie, who's a couple of them played pretty well. I think there's a player on the practice squad right now who had a pretty good offseason that could have been on the active roster, and Trubisky could have been off it and saved themselves a couple million. They didn't. And you saw Trubisky come in and make a couple nice plays in the interim last week. And you mentioned the Giants. That's obviously a big one. But not a lot of teams, Dan, have gone to that degree of where most people feel at least comfortable that the QB2 can walk in and keep this thing alive. It's an interesting dichotomy, right? Like of the situations you have, I think Mac Jones is probably the most comfortable, right? Is Carson Wentz in this conversation a little bit, or is this going to be a disastrous stretch for Minnesota here?
I mean, usually I'm willing to give these retread quarterbacks in a good coaching situation a second, third, fourth chance, but
yeah, the Indy stuff was bad.
Yeah, it was real bad, right? Recent iterations of Carson Wentz have been terrible. So it's going to be hard, but there's pieces there. If he can just kind of keep it in the lines, then maybe there's some potential there, but brutal division.
Yeah,
it's going to be tough stretch for Minnesota, in my opinion.
Okay. We'll see. I hate that we're already here basically in the bridge between week 2 and week 3. But like I said, about 16% of the league is already dealing with some kind of QB1 issue. And, that's just not a train that slows down, unfortunately. It's a violent league, and they've done everything that they can to protect this position, and still here we are. So we'll see where we can get to going forward. But for now, I do think some teams have taken the next step to at least addressing this. Mac Jones got basically like a $7 million guarantee. Davis Mills just got a $7 million guarantee in Houston, and that's not a player we think of as competent QB2, but they certainly do. Okay, they're compensating him as if that guy could step in right now and be some sort of, offensive game management system for that Houston team right now, who is sort of walking on fumes themselves. But Cincinnati's not going that route, which is kind of the overarching theme here. They're going back down to a player that, lightning in a bottle, Jake Browning last year, right? And for all intents, certainly lightning in a bottle in week 2. He came out throwing picks left and right and still found a way to win that game. I think other facets of the Bengals organization maybe lifting themselves up a little bit, but it's an interesting situation. We'll continue to monitor across the league, but the money trails really haven't improved with QB2s going forward. We'll see if that changes after yet another season early on where teams are dealing with this. Quickly, a couple teams that, I don't know, the storylines have changed a little bit over the course of where we were in the preseason versus where we are heading towards week 3. Certainly the Bengals are on there. There was some blind faith for Carolina, and they're relevant to our neck of the woods, Dan, because Bryce Young's heading toward an extension eligibility window in December. Where are we with this thing? Are we headed more towards blow this whole freaking thing up, including Bryce Young, or do you think it's just one of those situations where they're just not getting things right now, but they got to let it, mature and deal a little bit for a couple months? Because they're expensive, man. I mean, they've been throwing this free agency stuff at the wall for a couple seasons now.
Yeah, I don't think anything. I mean, it's an evaluation year to me. I didn't have expectations. Last year there were some positives, but before the positives there were a whole lot of negatives. So, like, which one of those outcomes are we going to see going forward? I think I'm not ready to make a declaration on this one way or another, but your point is heard on the free agency stuff. They're going to have to pay the piper at some point, and if things don't change fast, they might have to do a whole assessment on the organization after 2025. Now, that's to say, I don't on the record, I don't think things are going to go that well, but I think they can certainly squeeze some positives out of 2025 season in terms of an evaluation standpoint.
Man, that's a tough sell, right? To just go through another season where we got to figure out what we have. Because like I said, I feel like they have drafted fairly well. Okay. And this Ted McMillan stuff is still TBD, but he's certainly flashed a little bit here early. And so has Bryce. But Bryce's inconsistency is going to be a problem. And this is year 3. And for most organizations, this is the line of demarcation for this rookie quarterback stuff, right? Some teams have been earlier than this, right? We saw the Colts obviously give up on Richardson twice now. This Carolina team is going to have to make some kind of hay about this quarterback position after 2025, one way or the other. Because if you're saying it's just an evaluation, and if he gets slightly better, we'll just roll into year 4, is that a possibility? Or do you think that at some point in time, they're going to look at what they are and what this 2026 draft class can be and make an actual foot in the sand declaration about what they can be going forward?
Well, I guess I just want to clarify. I think they need a full reset. Just to be clear, I don't know what the move to make week 3 is what I'm saying. What are they going to do? Are they just going to sell every player they have worth any draft pick and try and recoup? So I'm just saying, like, if there's any chance Bryce Young is the guy, they gave up so much, they have so much invested in that I think you have to see that through, because you cannot let him go to another franchise and be a solid quarterback 2 years from now. Do you know what I mean? We've seen these retread quarterbacks
from Carolina. Baker,
yes,
Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and now we're maybe seeing that with Daniel Jones. You just laid it out. Or we just laid that point out earlier. I mean, I'm willing to just say, like, give it the year, but I don't think things are going to work out, which will lead to, yeah, they've drafted poorly. I mean, Xavier Legette, that was a prime draft piece that just like looks totally lost on the football field.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where they go either. I'm just saying, like, week 3, I don't really know what move they have to make. That's all.
Fair enough. It's early, but it's on my watch, right? And that's kind of what I do this
For
time
sure.
of year is I build a list of things I'm going to have to come back to in December before I start diving into the offseason. And, Cincinnati's all in 2026 is certainly on my radar right now. And Carolina is, as the team that can completely gut themselves, quarterback position included, is already there. And I hate that because we all saw kind of a better version of Bryce Young at the end of 2024, and it might have just been smoke and mirrors because a lot of teams already had the gas pedal off, and it appears that they just don't have things figured out yet in terms of a system, and maybe he's just not one of those players that can elevate a team. So we're on Carolina watch. Let's put it that way. I'm going to share my screen quickly and put up a list for you. Okay. I'm showing you the top 10 average paid quarterbacks in football right now. I want you to tell me the player that you're most worried about at the top of this list.
I mean, it's pretty clearly Trevor Lawrence, just based on the recent vibes. I'm usually contrarian guy, want to believe in it. I'm not saying he's dead or terrible, but for his price tag and how he has performed. Like, even the Jag stuff at the end of last year was with Mac Jones, right?
Yep.
It wasn't even with him. So we've seen after 2 weeks, the vibes there are not good, to the point where that does worry me. Man, the Brock Purdy stuff in hindsight looks so, like, we talked at length.
We talked about this exact scenario.
Literally, and
Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers or Mac Jones replacing him, so they never had to pay him. We talked about this specifically, Dan.
Literally. So that's why, like, when that happened, now I want to again state Brock Purdy deserved a pay bump.
Yeah.
But I was a little bit shocked that they decided to do it and at that price tag, because of the success that they've had with retread quarterbacks and getting more with less out of essentially no-name guys at the time. So that one did surprise me a bit. Other than that, I mean, the Tua stuff looks terrible.
I'm gonna push back here a little bit in a positive way. I think a lot of people out of the gate would have looked at this list and said Tua right away because the Dolphins are a mess. But you and I expected this. And the reason that I'm not going to classify him as the top dog in this list, Dan, is because they structured the contract in preparation for this.
Right.
They can get out of Tua's contract after this year with a huge mess, with the Russell Wilson mess of cash and cap, but they can cleanly get out of this contract after 2026. So we're talking about, one more full season after this from a contractual standpoint of obligation. Trevor Lawrence has 4 years of obligation left, 4, which means that this brand new coaching staff that he already appears to hate, right, or certainly isn't respecting, let's put it that way, is probably going to be gone before Trevor Lawrence is going to be gone in terms of how this is going to work, and that's a terrible way to start a brand new regime. So yeah, that is the standout right now. And by the way, I think Lawrence has turned a corner a little bit. He is not a 1-1. He is not Clemson Trevor Lawrence. He is not elevating offensive players. But I think there's a world where he can be a very expensive game manager. And the reason I bring this list up, Dan, is we're going to have a lot of talk soon. Maybe not us specifically because we try to avoid this stuff, but the natural media of the football is really going to start to talk about these quarterback salaries, especially with injuries, especially with mediocre play, right? Now, Dak is doing his job right now at $60 million. He's doing his job. I mean, he is kind of pulling a defunct offseason from Dallas, obviously, out of the grave and into back into good standing. He's doing that, and he's done that before, but he's an oft-injured player. We're at a place right now where this top 10 really can't hold a candle in terms of even being close to financial value. And these players shouldn't be valued. They should be overpaid. They should be well paid. They are a one-of-one position in sports, really. But I'm telling you right now, the narratives are really going to start to come down on these quarterback contracts because owners don't want to immediately go and pay Trevor Lawrence as soon as possible. And if I bring it back to our conversation that we started, Do you think the Houston Texans are dying to throw $60 million at CJ Stroud right now? Because that's where we're headed right now, right? That's the next big conversation.
Yeah, not at all. And this is I mean, not to like recall years ago conversations, but we talked about this in the past when this really started to balloon. At what is the breaking point? Like, obviously these guys deserve this money and they're the most important players on the team, but when you simply when they take up X amount of your cap space and you simply eliminate them because of an injury and the whole thing falls apart. I mean, we're seeing it with the Bengals. That team is so top heavy between Burrow, Higgins, Chase, and Hendrickson that you remove Burrow from that piece or from the equation, and Higgins and Chase almost become not irrelevant, but less relevant for sure. And the whole thing crumbles. So, yeah, we talked about this a while ago, and I think we're finally hitting that we're like, I think we specifically used the Jared Goff conversation, Jared Goff as the example in this conversation, and that doesn't even look that terrible right now. It's not super comfortable, but he's what you say, a serviceable, top 15-ish quarterback, right? So does he deserve 50 mil a set or X amount of cap space? I don't know what the right way to maneuver this going forward is, but I do think there will be extra importance from contending teams placed on getting solid, if not, dare I say, good backup quarterbacks going forward.
Bingo. So we're bridging the two conversations, right? Because it's every other position in this league, every other one has gone to some by committee. Every single position. There's even swing tackles and guards that can play center, right? Everybody has something else, somebody else available at all times. And it just hasn't happened with this position yet. And what's funny is, and I think this will be the narrative, right? This will be your first take narrative at some point in time. It's happened, but I'm talking like, the conversation that really starts to hit home, like it has with NBA salaries, like it did with, baseball contracts for years and years after A-Rod and Pujols and Jason Hayward and all those albatross contracts that we got during that big stretch run, right? We're kind of in that, we're heading towards that bubble conversation with these quarterback contracts. And the word for me is competency. You're paying for competency right now. You're paying for somebody who can at least think their way through the game at a fast enough rate and match it physically, right? Get the ball out quickly, obviously be accurate. But there's only like 3 or 4 checks that have to be checked to get $50 million in this league right now at this position. You know what I mean? Versus where some of our sports are, whereas there's going to be the Lamars, the Joshes, the Hurtses to some degree, although Hurts, is a different conversation. But the players that truly take the game both mentally and physically to a whole new level, the unicorns, okay? There should be a tier for those players financially. And then there should be a very deep tier that is much more manageable for these teams. And I'm not here to tell you that 52 million and 55 million isn't manageable because of the way that the cap can be maneuvered. But in Joe Burrow's case, for instance, week 3 now, he's essentially dead cap. His contract has flipped to dead cap. And the Bengals, because of who they are and the way that they operate from a mindset standpoint, they are not going to add more cap to that dead cap. They're going to minimize their losses immediately, and that's going to affect the way that they play football for the next 16 weeks. So if that becomes the case, if we see the injury stuff continue to pick up steam like it has, it's just math. The trends are out there. And we think that most of these players are overpaid because they're being paid on competency, not actual, overachievements and ability, then at some point in time, you're going to see QB2 money come up. You're going to see QB1 money come down. And those things are going to become closer and closer because both are needed in this league. And that becomes more fair value in this league, right? The markets become more fair value. We've seen it with the other positions, okay? The Barkleys and the McCaffreys have plateaued, and your Ramondre Stevensons and your James Cooks and that next tier, right? And then their backups, essentially, David Montgomery to Jamar Gibbs, right, has slowly come up a little bit. So where QB2 or RB2s were never paid 8 years ago, now they're actually being paid pretty well in the grand scheme of things but it's the RB1 that suffered. That's going to become the quarterback conversation at some point in time for every non-unicorn situation. QB1 is going to slide down or plateau, and those QB2s, they have to become more valuable, and they have to earn more money because of it. So I do think, to bring this all to a big bow, we're starting to see that happen, and we'll see if the Mac Jones and those conversations that have already happened actually pan out, right? If Mac Jones keeps the 49ers alive for the next month and they end up getting a playoff spot, which many of us didn't think was very, very likely at the onset of this season, that's going to be one of the big storylines to take away from 2025, that the 49ers were smart enough to overpay a QB2 to keep themselves on life support, which ended up getting themselves a chance in January. It's not rare. There's not many organizations that will go this route yet, but maybe that's a trend we should start to follow going forward.
Well said.
All right, man, let's talk some baseball. You got some homework for me. I'm going to let you drive this conversation, and it's about the offseason, right? We know that we're heading towards a situation here soon, Dan, where as soon as this regular season and the playoffs kind of come to the completion, and October baseball, which is the best, actually leaves our lives, it's about option decisions and non-tenders and getting your 40-man set, and obviously players who need to be added to a 40-man because of their minor league status. All that stuff comes together in like an hour and a half, and it's crazy for us to track, but it's also crazy on front offices, which is why you kind of get that lull before winter meetings and free agency actually takes over. So we're going to start with that kind of data stuff, those kind of conversations. And yes, we're doing work on free agents, and there's some massive contracts coming this winter that we'll debate at some point in time over the course of the next few weeks. But give me a few option decision storylines that we should be thinking about right now, even with the last 2 weeks of the regular season upon us.
Well, that is, so there's obviously, I actually went through our predictions. We have an options page on spottrek.com. We predict most of these outcomes, as in, a lot of these are already sort of predetermined, right? We knew as soon as before the ink dried on Pete Alonso's contract that he was very likely opting out, right? But from a database perspective, we don't want to represent that as he's a definite UFA. We want to log it as that's a player opt out. So it's still showing on our front end as a player opt out, but basically we're using a prediction column to kind of let you, the viewer, know that we are predicting him to be a free agent, even though he is tagged as a player option, if that makes sense. So a lot of these were predetermined, basically. I went through these in April or May early on in the season and came and predicted these. Very few of them changed when I went through them just now. There's only really a handful of them, if you will, that I even had to kind of think twice about. So those are kind of going to be the ones I want to focus on here. I don't really think we need to retread the Pete Alonso thing right now, because we're definitely going to be talking about that this offseason.
Yeah, the method as a whole, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, off the top, Bregman has an opt-out. He's going to opt out. I personally expect the Red Sox to try and bring him back, similar to Matt Chapman in San Francisco. We've seen that play out. So some of those obvious ones I'm not going to get too deep into here, because we're going to talk about those probably more in depth as we actually hit free agency. But in terms of some interesting ones that I think are going to be tough, Max Muncy was probably the one that I stumbled on the most. He has a $10 million club option next year with no buyout. Originally, I had this tagged as he would be the Dodgers would not bring him back. He'd be a free agent. But the more I think about it, he's kind of been healthy down the stretch here. I could see that going the other way here, but I guess I don't know. Do you have a 2 cents on Max Muncy? I just think the Dodgers are in a window. 10 mil for that club is not necessarily overpaying for a player of that caliber when he is healthy and productive. So I tossed that one up in the air, though.
I think that they will decline it on the onset, just to give themselves some opportunities to breathe a little bit with it. I'm sure they've already got handshake situations behind the scenes with the agency and with Max Muncy, that if these 2 or 3 things don't happen, we've already got offers on the table to bring you back, right? But Dan, I think they would decline it out of the gate free up some of that payroll, at least in terms of heading towards the offseason a little bit, because it's a pretty good free agent market, both at third base and at first base, which, that's essentially where he lives. And there's a couple of international guys that the Dodgers are going to be in on that are high power hitting production. Definitely could have ties to the Dodgers. Obviously, the Ohtani stuff and the Yamamoto stuff puts them in the driver's seat for these conversations and could become the day one starting third baseman for this team. So I do think that they're going to wait. They're going to punt on Muncy initially with the idea that if, plan C for us is to bring you back, please don't go out there and if you get any offers, we'll try to match them kind of thing. But I do think they have bigger fish in mind for the Dodgers at that position for 2026.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I couldn't land one direction, so I like where you're at with that. TBD. I think the most most intriguing one of all here is Ha-Seong Kim, kind of because of what we just saw. So last year he signed a 2-year deal with the Rays, coming off of shoulder surgery. He's was expected back earlier in the season, but he's only played about a month, 36 games entering today. So this has changed. Originally, I thought he would be a pretty easy opt-out. If he came back, had a good 2025 season, that is, in theory, I projected him to opt out of that, looking for a multi-year deal. But what could have complicated that was the Rays could have tagged him with a qualifying offer, right? So that's where this trying to determine his value got a little bit complicated because of the value. It was because of the value of that deal, of that option in 2025, and the qualifying offer value, which was just over 21 million last year. There was kind of this needle being threaded there, right, where the player had I thought the player would have motivation to opt out, but the Rays might have motivation to just QO him or try and trade that player option value. But nonetheless,
well, that's exactly what they did, right? They traded him at the deadline.
Well, he was waived and the Braves claimed him. So technically, this still applies. If he got traded, that's an interesting aspect here too. If he got traded, the qualifying offer would have came off the table. You can't qualifying offer a player who got traded. So instead, the Rays waived him, the Braves claimed him, and now this is a real interesting situation. I personally don't think he's had a healthy or productive enough season for him to opt out for a multi-year deal now. So I think the Braves will be happy to bring him back, though. They've been pandering at shortstop for a long time. I think they were aggressive on claim. They saw this as a free trade. That waiver claim was a free trade to them. So they're likely, he is likely to pick up that option, in my opinion. And I do think that the Braves could look to give him a multi-year extension, and sort of add him to that core of offensive players that we've seen them building.
When healthy, this is one of the better utility players in all of baseball. And he could be a starting shortstop. He could be a starting center fielder. And he's only, 30-ish right now. So there's time for him to fully rehab. It's one of those savvier moves by the Braves that, it's a team that can dish out $16 million next year to him, see where things go halfway through the season. And then, like you said, offer a multi-year extension and make him maybe the shortstop for the next 3 to 4 seasons on that roster, which you're right. That's a position they've struggled with over the past couple of seasons. So that's a really fascinating one for sure. I'm going to push one back at you here because it's a guy you've been near and dear to. What happens with Shane Bieber in Toronto? Because that was a rehab situation as well that was supposed to go quicker. He was supposed to balloon up, decline that player option for next year, hit the open market, and finally find his big free agent cash in. Is that going to be the case for Bieber?
I don't see why it wouldn't be, as long as he finishes the next couple weeks here healthy. He's looked tremendous. I mean, the pedigree's there. He's not an overpowering pitcher, which sometimes you lose that with Tommy John. He's always been more of a finesse guy, great command, etc. I don't see how he wouldn't command more than the 16 million on a 1-year deal, but I think he definitely would command a multi-year deal. So it sounds like the Blue Jays have interest in keeping him long term. So whether that's like an extension in that no man land period before he becomes a free agent after the World Series, there's opportunity for them to extend him there. So I think there's place for a reunion there, but I do think he is intending to opt out of that. Yes.
Okay. Any more options, or so we flip the switch here?
Yeah, so a couple I'll just touch on real quick. Coming off the Ha-Seong Kim Ray stuff, Brandon Lau, second baseman, has an $11.5 million club option with a $500,000 buyout. This is interesting to me because he's a productive player. That 11.5 is undervalued, but I don't know if the Rays want to do it, right?
Yeah. Anything over 10 is always a red flag in Tampa Bay.
Yeah. So this seems to me like it's going to get exercised either way, whether it is in Tampa or whether he gets traded. I think the value, the production outweighs the cost of that option. So I think that one does get exercised. Just an interesting situation because it's the Rays. And on that same note, Pete Fairbanks, he's been in surprisingly one of the best most consistent and productive relievers over the last 3 years. He had what was a $7 million club option for next season. He has added via various incentives that are kind of too cumbersome to lay out verbally, but I am tracking these all in a weekly piece at Spotrac.com if you want to review the more specific details. But he has escalated that from $7 million to $11.5 million. Wow. Same situation. He's added $4.5 million. He could add a total of $5.5 million. I think he needs to appear in like 6 more games in the last 12 games or something like that, which is kind of an uphill battle, but it's not totally unattainable. But nonetheless, that has made that in a vacuum, that's still a very cost-effective contract, but again, possibly not for the Rays. So another similar situation where that option might get picked up and traded if depending on where the Rays think they are in their window here. So 2 interesting ones there. Just a couple other ones because this will trickle into our incentive talk, I think. Matt Strahm literally yesterday pitched the 8th inning for the Phillies, which got him over 60 innings. That vested what was a conditional club option into a guaranteed of $7.5 million next year if he passes a physical at the end of the season, which, by all intents, he seems healthy. So again, to summarize that, yesterday he added $3 million, he maxed out incentives that got his option from $4.5 million to $7.5 million, and he got that guaranteed in the all in one night. And Lucas Giolito, he has a $14 million club option with the Red Sox here.
This is a big one.
He is at 136 innings currently. If he gets to 140 and he starts tomorrow, which is Wednesday, that becomes a $19 million mutual option. Why this is important? He's been quietly very good down the stretch here, whereas the beginning of the year, this was kind of a question mark if they would even want to bring him back. But at $14 million on a club option, I think the Red Sox would absolutely do that. If that becomes a $19 million mutual option, mutual options never get exercised. Always one side of those gets denied. So that's going to make him a free agent. So it's likely he achieves that this week or beyond, but it's just a little bit of an interesting situation there to watch. And then real quickly, I just want to touch on a few of these injury, what I would call the injury options. Lourdes Gurriel just last week tore his ACL. He had a $13 million player option for last year. I was intent on him opting out of that for a multi-year deal at a similar guarantee this offseason. But he tore his ACL, will be out most of next year, which it makes it certain he'll opt into that. The catch here is that there's also a 2027 club option that has a $5 million buyout attached to it. So that essentially becomes an $18 million injury for the Arizona Diamondbacks, who were probably going to kind of take a second look at their payroll books this offseason. So that one kind of crushes them. AJ Minter has a player option for next year that looked like he had a great start with the Mets. Looked like he would probably opt out of that. Now, all but certain he'll be back on that, recovering from major injury. And then I just have John Means and Jose Urquidy kind of grouped into a similar bucket here.
Mhm.
Both of them were out almost all of 2025. Seems like they're going to probably get back in the final weeks here to make 2 or 3 starts down the stretch. If those guys are healthy, John Means has a $6 million club option. Urquidy has a $4 million club option. By all means, I would expect those to get picked up, but I kind of want to wait and see what they look like down the stretch. But if they look healthy and productive here over the last couple, if they can get in and make a couple starts here, those could be tremendous values down the line here. So that's kind of my wrap up on the option stuff. We'll take a deeper dive into the more prominent names here as we head towards free agency, I'm sure.
Let's stick with my Mets for one more then. Does Edwin Diaz opt out at this point, Dan?
Oh yeah, I have
2 years, $38 million left on that contract. Do you think so? Yes.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, and I think the value coming into the year, I was really unsure where that landed. I mean, the first couple weeks were not good. I think your head was in a similar spot, but I think bringing in Ryan Helsley, who was a bona fide closer, and sticking him in the setup role, was a bona fide. Edwin Diaz is no questions our closer. I'm just saying he's been good enough. There were no questions. If there were questions, Ryan Helsley would have supplanted him in that role, right? So Diaz is the guy. He's been good enough. I think that's like proof to me that he's going to opt out and get another multi-year deal.
Yeah. So he's got 2 years left. He's 31 and change. It'll be his essentially age 32 season next year. So what you do is you opt out and you turn a 2-year deal into a 4-year deal, right? And you just guarantee yourself 4 years, probably around the same price point going forward. So that's a lot of these player option opt-outs and things like that, terminations. You might even see those contracts come back at a lower APY, at a lower tax rate, right? But it's about securing extra years, longer term, more years guaranteed, because what else matters in Major League Baseball right now is that full guarantee. You spend so much of your youth going year to year on basically minimum salaries that the second you have a chance to cash in additional years, you do it. So a lot of that goes into these option decisions. Good work on this. We'll continue to monitor it. You can see this option view here visually on the podcast, but also obviously live on Spotrac.com. You mentioned a few of the incentives that could be hitting as we get to the close of this 2025 regular season. Anything notable to discuss that has hit or is going to hit down the stretcher that we should be watching, Dan?
Yeah, a few specifically from last week. We've been tracking these about a month now, so it's like as they're achieving these, there's a lot of thresholds to MLB incentives, if you will. So it's not really like, did Mike Evans gain 1,000 yards, yes or no, in the NFL, et cetera. There's a lot of like levels to the MLB stuff. So we are tracking that in a weekly piece if you want to kind of look more in depth at those details. But in terms of last week, we had a couple big ones. I just mentioned the Pete Fairbanks one. That was a sizable guarantee that he locked up for next year. Robert Suarez, quietly another really good productive closer over the last couple years. He has been on an $8 million base salary the last 2 years. Last year, he had incentives that added an extra $2.5 million to that salary. Same thing this year. He has maxed out those in both seasons now. He's also got a multi-year opt-out. He's all but certainly going to opt out of that one.
Yep.
Patrick Corbin, I just want to point this out as like a resurrection. I thought he was going to like go the way of extinction earlier in this year, like be an early DFA candidate. He had a heavily incentive-laden contract tied to innings pitched. And basically every 15 innings pitched from like a low threshold, he's adding $250K. He's added in total so far 1.4 mil to his salary this season, which is, I believe, the largest cumulative we've seen. So kudos to him for taking a small 1-year deal and making something of it. This was the ultimate bet on yourself.
That's interesting.
So.
It's not unlike this backup quarterback conversation we just got finished having. He's been the innings eater stuff has been his mojo. That's been his MO, right? He's not very talented anymore. He only had kind of a 2 or 3 year stretch where he was one of the better pitchers in baseball, at least in the National League. But he goes out there, stays healthy, and gives them 5 to 6. Most times he picks up the ball. That is becoming a pretty necessary element to this game right now, especially because your top starters, your hard throwing strikeout starters are only going 4.5 innings in this league right now. And obviously baseball as a whole is trying to address this with some rule changes or whatever is going to come down the pipeline. But until that happens, you need some guys like Patrick Corbin and Zach Littell and all these guys who, they might have a 4.5 ERA and they might give up 18 runs every fourth start. And by the way, that happens to Corbin. But 3 starts in a row, they're just serviceable inning eater, bottom of the rotation guys. And there's some value to that. So it's good to see not only teams identifying these players, but giving them a chance to earn what they deserve as long as they do what they're supposed to be doing, which is not flashy. It's not even productive. It's useful. It allows for rest. It allows for some things in a 162 season to mature and grow. And you're seeing some value with that. And the Texas Rangers, by the way, are on kind of life support with this season because of this, because of stuff like this, because of fill in the blank guys for all these injuries. And Corbin's one of those guys. So it's a not for nothing conversation.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off that, Jose Quintana's the same thing.
Yeah.
He signed 1 for 4 with Milwaukee. He had $5.75 million in total incentives from roster bonus, game started, innings pitched. He's going to max out the vast majority of those. So the same exact situation, a guy who everyone threw to the curb signs a 1 for 4 with the ability to get that to almost 1 for 10. And he's going to do it by just going out there and being a productive guy who toes the rubber every 5th day. Right. So kudos to them for kind of getting.
And by the way, and I think he made a ton of money doing it. It's hard to think about him in this light, but Clayton Kershaw was also that guy this year.
Correct. Yep.
Started late, rehabbed himself back to full health. Obviously didn't want to go through the hoops of spring training with, at his age and his point of the career, but he's been the 6th starter. He's been the plug and play guy for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And because he was active and healthy for the most of the season, I think he made what, $12-13 million. I think he added like 7 or 8 million of incentives that were built into the contract to do just what he's done.
Yep, so. He maxed it out too. So, and that's what I mean. We have some guys who had earned a bunch of incentives in the past. We will have an end of year wrap up piece covering and pod, yes, but we will cover these all in depth from like a total perspective, because a lot of these guys are adding dollars every day, which gets confusing to try and track in a writing piece. So we will definitely do an end of season roundup. Last one I'll do here, save the best for last. Ketel Marte is a super interesting one. Now, I say this because he has incentives for plate appearances, 500 and 550 plate appearances. He adds 500K each to the following year's salary, right? So he's already earned the 500. He's on pace to break that. He is on pace to break that 550, but just barely by we're talking like he can't miss a game kind of thing. Why this is relevant? We're going to get into a little gossip here, but if you recall, after the All-Star game, earlier in the season, he apparently had his home broken into. He went to the All-Star game. After the All-Star game, he did not go back to the team. He instead went home, I believe, to the Dominican Republic. And there was a report that caused some rift, that caused a rift with the team, etc. He had to address it. I think it sounds like it's all cleared up, but at the time is when I was really starting to get into these incentives, and I noticed that he is going to be right up against that number after missing those 2. I think he missed 2 games. So this is going to come down to the wire for him. He, like I said, he needs to get to 550 plate appearances. He averages about 4.4 plate appearances per game. With the remaining games, he's on pace to be at about 558. So he basically can't miss 2 games, in my opinion. Otherwise, he will add that $1 million to his salary. But also, I mean, obviously he can't predict health and injuries, but if he laid this out in advance to know that he could miss those 2 games and still hit his $1 million incentive on the final game of the season, that's what I do this for. So
I think it's a very lucky thing that the Mets imploded and that teams like Arizona have a really legitimate chance to sneak into the postseason right now. I think they're a game and a half out. Otherwise, we're probably talking about this in a very different context. We're probably talking about the fact that they're going to start sitting players for physical purposes with these kind of things in mind. And by the way, that stuff gets detected on Twitter pretty quickly these days. So you're probably going to pique some interest with this one, especially if we find out that Ketel Marte is a healthy scratch on a Tuesday randomly coming up here.
Yeah. So on that note, though, also just I will finish with this: the incentive stuff. You're going to see a lot of hand wringing over. Did this guy get sat to miss incentives? Listen, it's collectively bargained.
Yeah.
It's the team's right. They can do it. Now, we will try and highlight when teams also do good by players. We talked at length about Andrew Heaney earlier in the year. The Pirates let him get his first threshold for, I believe it was innings pitched or games started. He also got 10 years of service, which is huge in terms of pension. So like before they cut him loose. So people said, is this the Pirates being cheap? We kind of poo-pooed that because of that. There's been some other instances already of that this year. Walker Buehler, same thing. Before Boston cut him loose, he earned some game started incentives. So you're going to hear hand wringing over that as we approach the end of the season. I would just caution you to take that all with.
I have a really easy closing statement for that, Dan, because it's a great point. You have negotiated yourself into this situation, the player and the agent, and it's your agent's job to tell you before you sign that dotted line that you are handing over the control of this situation to the team. 100% of it. It is their prerogative to not start you, to not allow you to finish games, to sub you out, to pinch run for you in the 7th inning, to eliminate 2 extra PAs for you. They have the ability to do this because they control that part of your contract. If it's not guaranteed, you don't have control of it. You know what I mean? So it's just buyer beware. That's all it is. Before you sign that dotted line, just understand that, yes, you should get 500 plate appearances this year, but if they can stop it from happening, they will. They just will. They're business people, right? They love baseball, but they love business just as much. So it sucks. It's terrible. I believe that from an optics standpoint, anything close should be paid out because the teams that do that, and that has become a thing, by the way, in all sports. You've seen some teams come back and say, look, good faith value. This guy's going to be on our team for the next 4 years. We're not going to screw up this relationship right now over $25,000 that could have been paid out. We're just going to pay it out and put a statement out about it saying, look, we're doing this. So we're going to get some great PR. It's going to make other agents and players notice, and we're going to win in the end, right? So you're more likely to see more of those stories than the negative ones. But if a team decides to pull the plug on someone to save some money this time of year, just you negotiated it. You signed the dotted line and you lost the control of that situation. It's just where we are.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. I didn't even consider until now about all of it, or as like I need to watch out for that with these, because we saw that with the All-Star bonuses for the first time this year, where teams, guys that didn't get their bonus, that they still issued it, and we had never seen that before. So that's interesting, where if there's guys that get close and for XYZ reason they got pulled and just missed the threshold, that would still get paid out. That's something to watch as we hit the finish line here.
Great work, man. We'll talk soon.